The exhibition hall stretched for miles, filled with the finest weapons and tools from 1,000 different worlds. Han Minji walked slowly past each display, her trained eye catching details that most visitors missed. She was Earth's representative at the Galactic Trade Summit, and everything here amazed her. Metals that changed color with temperature, blades that never dulled, armor that weighed nothing but stopped plasma fire. But one display made her stop completely. The blades floating in the center showcase shimmered with patterns she recognized. Light and dark waves flowed through the metal like frozen water. The sign above read, Quantum Folded Steel by Master Velcris of Draknar, the finest metallurgy in 12 sectors. Minji leaned closer. The patterns looked exactly like something her uncle made in his mountain workshop back on Earth. Beautiful, aren't they? A deep voice said behind her. She turned to see a tall alien with dark blue skin and 4 arms. His eyes glowed faintly orange. This had to be Velcris himself. A crowd was gathering around them. They are, Minji agreed. The folding pattern is impressive. Velcris smiled, showing sharp white teeth. Impressive? My dear human, this is perfection. 15,000 years of Draknari metallurgy have led to this moment. No species in the known galaxy has matched our quantum folded steel. Minji nodded politely. It reminds me of Damascus steel. My uncle makes similar patterns. The crowd went quiet. Velcris stared at her for a long moment, then laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that echoed through the hall. Other aliens joined in the laughter. Damascus? That ancient human technique? Velcris wiped his eyes. My dear, we use quantum forges that manipulate matter at the atomic level. We fold steel in ways that defy your physics. Your uncle hammers metal in a fire pit, yes? Charming, but hardly comparable. Minji felt her face grow warm, but she kept her voice calm. I didn't mean to offend. The patterns just looked familiar. No offense taken, Velcris said, still grinning. He picked up one of his blades and held it out. Tell me, can your uncle's hammered steel cut through titanium composite without losing its edge? Can it bend to 90 degrees without breaking? Can it maintain molecular alignment under extreme temperatures? I don't know, Minji admitted. I've never tested his blades that way. Another alien pushed through the crowd. This one had gray skin and too many fingers. Minji recognized him as Raxtil, a wealthy arms dealer she'd met earlier in the week. This is fascinating, Raxtil said, his voice oily and smooth. Master Velcris, perhaps we could make this interesting. A challenge, perhaps? Velcris raised an eyebrow. What kind of challenge? The human says her people can make similar steel. Let her prove it. Raxtil's smile showed pointed teeth. If Earth can produce a blade that matches your quantum-folded steel, I will personally offer them a 50 million credit contract for weapons manufacturing. The crowd murmured with excitement. 50 million credits was serious money, even in galactic terms. Velcris crossed 2 of his forearms. And if they fail? Then everyone knows humanity is as primitive as their technology suggests, Raxtil said. No contracts. No trade agreements. They can return to their little corner of space and play with their fire pits. Minji's heart pounded. This was getting out of control. She was just a metallurgist, not a diplomat. Where was Park Ji-won? Her supervisor should be handling this. I'll sweeten the deal, Velcris said, warming to the idea. If humanity can match my steel, I'll personally fund Earth's admission into the Metalworkers Guild. Full membership, all benefits, access to rare materials from guild worlds. The crowd gasped. The Metalworkers Guild was one of the most exclusive organizations in the galaxy. Membership meant access to markets and materials that could transform Earth's manufacturing capabilities. But, Velcris continued, holding up one finger, when you fail, you must admit publicly that human metallurgy is inferior. You will post this admission on every trade network in the galaxy. Minji's mind raced. This was a disaster. She couldn't accept this challenge. One wrong word and she'd damage Earth's reputation for decades. She needed to politely decline and walk away. 30 days, she heard herself say. I'll need 30 days. The words came out before she could stop them. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. 30 days? Velcris laughed again. My dear, I could give you 30 years and the result would be the same. But yes, 30 days. That seems fair. Raxtil pulled out a datapad. I'll draw up the contract. Both parties sign and we'll reconvene here in 1 standard month for the demonstration. Minji's hands shook slightly as she pressed her thumb to the datapad. What had she just done? The crowd was already spreading the news. She could hear aliens making bets on the outcome. This will be entertaining, Velcris said, patting her shoulder with one of his large hands. Don't feel bad when you fail, little human. We've all been young and proud once. This will be a good learning experience for your people. The crowd dispersed slowly, still talking and laughing. Minji stood alone in front of the quantum-folded steel display, staring at the patterns in the metal. Her communicator buzzed. It was Jiwan, and he did not sound happy. My office, now. The walk to the diplomatic quarters felt like a death march. Jiwan met her at the door, his face red with anger. Are you insane? He shouted before she even sat down. Do you know what you've just done? 50 million credits. The Metalworkers Guild. Earth's entire reputation is riding on this. I know, Minji said quietly. You know? You know? Jiwan paced back and forth. We're going to look like fools. Velcris has been the finest metalworker in 12 sectors for 200 years. His quantum forges cost more than Earth's entire space program. And you think your uncle can match that with a hammer and fire? Minji didn't answer right away. She thought about her uncle's workshop in the mountains outside Jeonju. She remembered watching him work as a child, the way the hammer rang against the steel, the smell of hot metal and coal smoke. She remembered her graduation present, a beautiful knife with flowing patterns that seemed to move in the light. Maybe, she said finally. Jiwan stopped pacing. Maybe that's all you've got? Maybe? Minji pulled out her communicator and started typing a message. Uncle Daehyun, she wrote, remember that Damascus blade you made for my graduation? I need you to make another. This time the galaxy is watching. She hit send and looked up at Jiwan. We have 30 days. I suggest we stop wasting time and start preparing. Jiwan stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're serious? Completely serious. We're all going to lose our jobs over this. Probably, Minji agreed. But if we do nothing, we lose anyway. At least this way we have a chance, her communicator buzzed. A reply from Uncle Daehyun. Come home. Bring measurements and metal samples. We have work to do, Minji smiled. I need to book transport back to Earth. Jiwan sat down heavily in his chair. I'll make the arrangements. But when this fails, I'm blaming you in my report. Fair enough, Minji said, heading for the door. Minji? Jiwan called after her. She turned back. Your uncle, he said quietly. Can he really do this? Minji thought about the knife she kept in her quarters. Perfect balance, sharp enough to split hairs, beautiful enough to hang in a museum. Her uncle had made it in a weekend. Ask me again in 30 days, she said, and walked out to catch the next transport home. The mountain road twisted through pine trees and morning fog. Minji sat in the passenger seat while Yoon Sora drove, both of them exhausted from the long flight from the spaceport. In the back seat sat 3 cases of exotic materials from the exhibition, including samples of Velcris's quantum-folded steel. There it is, Minji said, pointing to a traditional Korean building nestled between the mountains. Smoke rose from the chimney even though it was barely dawn. Sora parked near the workshop entrance. They could hear the rhythmic sound of hammer on metal before they even opened the doors. Minji smiled. Uncle Daehyun was already working. Inside, the workshop was exactly as Minji remembered. One side held traditional tools that looked centuries old. The other side had modern testing equipment that Minji had bought for her uncle 5 years ago. He rarely used it. Cho Daehyun stood at the forge, his gray hair tied back, his arms still strong at 67 years old. He looked up when they entered and set down his hammer. Minji-ya, he said warmly, wiping his hands on his apron. You brought a friend. This is Yoon Sora, my research assistant, Minji said. Sora, this is my uncle, Master Cho Daehyun. Sora bowed respectfully. It's an honor, Master Cho. Daehyun waved off the formality. Just Daehyun is fine. Come sit. You must be hungry. He led them to a small table near the back of the workshop and poured tea. Traditional rice cake sat on a plate. For a few minutes they ate and drank in comfortable silence. So, Daehyun finally said, tell me about this challenge. Minji explained everything. The exhibition, Velcris's quantum-folded steel, the impossible bet she'd made. As she talked, Sora set up her tablet to show scans of Velcris's blades. Look at this molecular alignment, Sora said, zooming in on the data. It's perfect. Every atom is precisely positioned. The quantum forge manipulates matter at levels we can't even measure properly with Earth technology. Daehyun studied the images carefully. The pattern is beautiful, he said. But the soul is missing. Soul? Sora looked confused. Daehyun stood and walked to his current project on the forge. This blade, he said, picking it up with tongs. I started it 3 days ago. High carbon steel from Pohang, nickel steel from Japan, with small amounts of chromium. I've folded it 7 times so far. That's 128 layers. Minji looked at the metal. Even in its rough state, she could see the faint pattern beginning to emerge. The aliens use quantum fields to align their atoms, Daehyun continued. They force the metal into perfection. But Damascus steel is different. We don't force, we teach. Teach? Sora was taking notes now. What do you mean? Daehyun set the blade back on the anvil. Each type of metal has its own character. High carbon is hard but brittle like a stubborn grandfather. Nickel is soft but tough like a patient grandmother. When you fold them together, again and again, they learn to work as one. The heat softens their stubbornness. The hammer guides them. The oil bath sets their memory. That's not scientific, Sora said, then immediately looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean… You're right, Daehyun said with a gentle smile. It's not scientific. It's older than science. My grandfather taught me this technique. His grandfather taught him. Our family has been forging Damascus steel for over 600 years. He walked to a cabinet and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a young man at a forge, his face serious, his hands on a hammer. Behind him stood an even older man, watching. My grandfather, Daehyun said, he made swords for the last Korean kingdom. When the world modernized, everyone said traditional forging would die. But he taught me that some knowledge is too valuable to lose. Minji remembered her grandfather. He had died when she was 12, but she still remembered the way he smiled when he worked, the way the workshop smelled of coal and metal and possibility. Uncle, she said carefully, can Damascus steel really match quantum-forged metal, scientifically? Daehyun poured more tea. Let me tell you what happens when I fold steel. Each fold doubles the layers. 7 folds is 128 layers. 15 folds is 32,768 layers. These layers are so thin they're almost at the molecular level. Sora's eyes widened. That's actually close to the quantum forge precision. The aliens use machines to place every atom perfectly, Daehyun continued. But perfect placement creates tension. The atoms want to move, but they're trapped. My method lets the atoms find their natural positions. They settle into harmony instead of fighting against force. He picked up one of Minji's graduation knives from a display shelf. When I made this, I folded the steel 13 times. 8,192 layers. Feel how it balances. Sora took the knife carefully. Her hands moved as she tested the weight, the balance point, the edge. It's perfect, she whispered. Not perfect, Daehyun corrected. Harmonious. There's a difference. He opened the cases Minji had brought and examined the exotic materials. Strange metals from alien worlds. Some that glowed faintly. Others that seemed to absorb light. He touched each one carefully. These are good metals, he said. They have strong spirits. I can work with them. How long will it take? Minji asked. Daehyun thought for a moment. To fold the steel 15 times properly with time to let it rest between sessions? 7 days for the folding. 2 days for shaping and tempering. 1 day for finishing and etching. 10 days total. We have 30 days, Minji said. That gives us time for testing. Testing is good, Daehyun agreed. But first watch. Both of you. You need to understand what Damascus steel really is. For the next hour he worked while they watched. He heated the metal until it glowed orange-red, then hammered it flat. The sound rang through the workshop like a bell. He folded the metal over itself, welded the fold shut with more hammer blows and returned it to the forge. Temperature is everything, he explained. Too hot and the carbon burns out. Too cold and the metal won't bond. The quantum forge uses sensors and computers. I use my eyes and my experience. How do you know the right temperature? Sora asked. The color, Daehyun said. Watch how the metal glows. Cherry red is too cold. Yellow is too hot. Orange red, like the morning sun, that's perfect. Also, you listen. Listen? He pulled the metal from the forge and struck it with his hammer. The sound was clear and bright. Hear that? The metal is happy. When it's wrong, the sound is dull. Sora looked at Minji with wide eyes. Minji understood. Everything they'd learned in university was about measurements and calculations. Uncle Daehyun worked with something deeper, something that couldn't be put into numbers. The day passed quickly. Daehyun worked steadily, folding the metal again and again. Between sessions, he let it rest while they ate lunch and talked about the galaxy, about trade summits and alien cultures. He listened with interest but never seemed worried. By evening, he had completed 8 folds. The metal now had 256 layers and the pattern was starting to show clearly. Tomorrow 7 more folds, Daehyun said. Then we shape it into a blade. That night, Minji and Sora stayed in the small guest house behind the workshop. Sora couldn't sleep. She kept reviewing the data on her tablet, comparing Velcris's perfect atomic alignment with what they'd seen today. Minji, she said in the darkness, I want to believe this will work. But the alien steel is scientifically superior in every way. How can traditional forging compete with quantum manipulation? Minji thought about her uncle's words. About teaching metal instead of forcing it. About harmony instead of perfection. Maybe we're asking the wrong question, she said. Maybe it's not about competing. Maybe it's about showing them something they forgot. What did they forget? That the path to the destination matters as much as the destination itself. 6 days later, Daehyun quenched the finished blade in oil. The workshop filled with steam and the sharp smell of hot metal. When he pulled it out and wiped it clean, even Minji gasped. The pattern was beautiful. Waves of light and dark steel flowed from handle to tip like water frozen in time. The blade seemed to glow with an inner light. Sora immediately started running tests. Flexibility, hardness, edge retention, structural integrity. The numbers appeared on her tablet and her hands started shaking. This is impossible, she whispered. What is it? Minji asked. The blade. It matches the alien steel. In every test. Every single one. Sora looked up, her eyes wide. How is this possible? Daehyun simply smiled and continued polishing the blade. The metal remembered what it wanted to be, he said. I just helped it remember. The demonstration arena was packed. Thousands of aliens from hundreds of species filled the seats and millions more watched through live feeds across the galaxy. Word of the challenge had spread far beyond what Minji expected. Betting pools had formed. News networks were calling it the metallurgy event of the century. Minji stood in the preparation room, holding the case that contained Uncle Daehyun's blade. Her hands were sweating. Jiwon paced nervously behind her. We can still withdraw, he said for the 10th time. Pay a fine, apologize, and go home. No, Minji said firmly. We're doing this. Sora sat in the corner reviewing test data on her tablet. She'd barely slept in 3 days, running every test she could think of on the Damascus blade. The results still amazed her. 5 minutes, an official announced through the door. Minji took a deep breath. She wished Uncle Daehyun could be here, but he'd refused to leave his workshop. The blade speaks for itself, he'd said. You don't need me there. The door opened and they walked into the arena. The crowd noise hit like a physical wave. Aliens of every shape and size filled the stands. Some had multiple eyes, some had no eyes at all. But all of them were watching. On the stage stood a massive testing platform with equipment Minji didn't recognize. Velcris was already there, his forearms crossed confidently. His quantum-folded blade floated in a display case beside him, shimmering with those familiar patterns. Raxtil stood between them, his role as mediator making him visibly excited. This was entertainment for him and probably profitable too given the betting. Welcome, Raxtil's voice boomed through speakers. Today we witness a historic challenge. Master Velcris of Draknar, finest metalworker in 12 sectors versus the primitive techniques of Earth. The crowd cheered. Minji noticed most of them seemed to be cheering for Velcris. Master Velcris, Raxtil continued, please demonstrate your quantum-folded steel. Velcris smiled and placed his blade on the testing platform. Holographic displays sprang to life around it, showing molecular structures, atomic alignments, and quantum bonding patterns. The crowd murmured in appreciation. 15,000 years of Draknari metallurgy, Velcris announced. This blade is folded at the quantum level, with perfect atomic alignment. It represents the pinnacle of metalworking science. He ran a series of tests. The blade cut through advanced composite materials like they were paper. It bent to extreme angles without breaking. It maintained perfect sharpness after cutting through materials that would destroy normal steel. The crowd applauded after each demonstration. Minji's heart sank. The blade was magnificent. How could Uncle Daehyun's work compete with this? And now, Raxtil said, turning to Minji, the human representative, please present your blade. Minji walked forward on shaking legs. She opened the case and the Damascus blade caught the light. The wave pattern shimmered, beautiful but somehow simple compared to the high-tech display around Velcris's blade. She placed it on the testing platform. No holograms appeared. No quantum readings. Just steel with a pattern. The crowd went quiet. Then someone laughed. Others joined in. Is this a joke? Someone called from the stands. Velcris walked over and examined the blade. His confident smile faded slightly. He picked it up, felt its weight, tested its balance. His orange eyes narrowed. This is interesting, he said carefully. He pulled out a handheld scanner and ran it over the blade. His expression changed from amusement to confusion. The molecular structure. It's similar to mine. But that's impossible without quantum manipulation. There's no quantum manipulation, Minji said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Just steel fire and a hammer. No, Velcris said flatly. That's impossible. You must be hiding the technology somehow. He scanned the blade again, more carefully this time. Show me how it was made. Minji pulled out her tablet. I have video from the workshop. She played the recording on the arena's main screen. The crowd watched Uncle Daehyun work, an old man in a traditional workshop, heating metal in a coal forge, hammering it with ancient tools. Folding, heating, hammering, folding again. No computers. No quantum fields. Just skill and patience. The laughter died away. The crowd watched in silence as the video showed day after day of work. Daehyun's face was calm and focused as he folded the steel 15 times, creating over 30,000 layers by hand. When the video ended, nobody spoke. This proves nothing, Velcris said, but his voice lacked conviction. The technology could be hidden. We need to test both blades directly. I agree, Minji said. For the next hour, both blades underwent identical tests. Flexibility tests showed both could bend to 90 degrees without breaking. Edge retention tests proved both maintained sharpness after cutting through advanced materials. Structural integrity tests confirmed both could withstand impacts that would shatter conventional steel. The crowd watched the test results appear on the displays. The numbers were almost identical. Velcris's confidence was gone now. He stared at the test results like they'd personally betrayed him. This can't be right. Run a full molecular scan. Check for any technological enhancement. The most advanced scanner in the arena was brought out. It could detect quantum manipulation at the atomic level, find any hidden technology, measure any form of enhancement. Both blades were scanned thoroughly. Velcris's blade showed exactly what everyone expected. Quantum bonding, atomic-level manipulation, evidence of advanced technological forging processes. Daehyun's blade showed nothing, just steel, folded steel with natural molecular alignment, but no technology, no quantum manipulation, no enhancement of any kind. The arena fell completely silent. You achieved quantum-level molecular alignment, Velcris said slowly. With fire and a hammer? My uncle calls it teaching the metal, Minji said quietly. Instead of forcing atoms into position, he guides them. The repeated folding at the right temperature lets the molecular structures find natural harmony. A tall alien with crystal-like skin stood up in the front row. Minji recognized her as Elder Thesia of the Krell, one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy. May I speak? Thesia's voice was like wind chimes. Raxtil nodded, surprised. Of course, Elder. Thesia walked down to the stage and approached the Damascus blade. She studied it for a long moment without touching it. 3,000 years ago, she said, my people made similar things. We called them harmony forged. We didn't use quantum forges because we didn't have them. We used time, heat, and skill. The results were beautiful, strong, perfect in ways our modern technology cannot replicate. She turned to face the crowd. Then we discovered quantum forging. It was faster, more efficient. We could make perfect blades in hours instead of weeks, so we abandoned the old ways. We thought we were advancing. Thesia picked up the Damascus blade carefully. But we lost something. We lost the understanding of why the old methods worked. We lost the knowledge that sometimes the slow path creates something the fast path cannot. She looked at Velcris. This human blade doesn't match your quantum-folded steel, Master Velcris. It teaches us something your blade cannot. It teaches us that we may have optimized ourselves out of wisdom. Velcris stood very still. His forearms hung at his sides. He looked at his blade, then at the Damascus blade, then back again. I spent 200 years perfecting quantum forging, he said quietly. I thought I understood metal completely. He paused. I was wrong. The crowd erupted. Some were arguing. Some were amazed. News networks were broadcasting the results across the galaxy. The betting pools were in chaos. Raxtil stepped forward, trying to regain control. Based on the test results, both blades are equal in performance. However, the challenge was to match Master Velcris's steel, and the human has won, Velcris interrupted. He looked at Minji. Not because your blade is better than mine, but because you've shown me that I stopped learning 200 years ago. I perfected a technique, but I forgot to ask if there were other techniques worth knowing. He held out one of his hands to Minji. I will honor my promise. Earth will join the Metalworkers Guild, and I have a request. What request? Minji asked. Teach me, Velcris said. Not how to use a hammer. I can learn that myself. Teach me how your uncle thinks. Teach me how to see metal the way he does. Teach me what I've forgotten. Minji thought about Uncle Daehyun in his mountain workshop, patiently folding steel. She thought about 600 years of knowledge passed down through her family. She thought about how her uncle always said that knowledge grows stronger when it's shared. Yes, she said, we can teach you. The crowd's noise faded into the background as Velcris examined the Damascus blade more carefully. His fingers traced the wave patterns, and for the first time in 200 years he saw something new in metal. In his workshop back on Earth, Uncle Daehyun set down his hammer and smiled. Somehow he knew. 2 weeks after the demonstration, Uncle Daehyun's workshop looked very different. 5 alien smiths from different species sat on cushions around the forge, drinking tea and looking uncomfortable. Velcris was the tallest. His forearms folded in what Minji now recognized as his thinking pose. Next to him sat a short, round alien named Brix from the Quellen Consortium. There was also Thesia the Krell Elder, a reptilian smith named Kor, and a being made of crystalline structures who communicated through musical tones. Daehyun poured more tea calmly, as if hosting aliens in his traditional Korean workshop was the most normal thing in the world. Master Cho, Velcris said formally, we've traveled across the galaxy to learn from you. We're ready to begin. Daehyun smiled. First more tea. Then we talk about metal. Brix shifted impatiently. With respect, Master, we don't have much time. I have a manufacturing empire to run. Can we start with the temperature calculations for optimal folding? What temperature do you use? Daehyun asked. 1,347 degrees precisely, Brix said proudly. Calculated by quantum computer for maximum molecular bonding. Daehyun stood and walked to his forge. He'd already started heating metal that morning. It glowed bright in the dim workshop. What temperature is this? Brix pulled out a scanner. 1,312 degrees. Too cold for proper bonding, is it? Daehyun picked up the metal with tongs and placed it on the anvil. He struck it with his hammer. The sound rang clear and bright through the workshop, almost musical. The metal is ready, listen. He hammered the steel, folding it over itself. The aliens watched in silence. When he finished and returned the metal to the forge, Velcris leaned forward. You didn't measure the temperature, he said. I watched the color, Daehyun replied. I listened to the sound. The metal tells you when it's ready. But that's not precise, Kor said, his reptilian tongue flicking nervously. How do you ensure consistency? By paying attention, Daehyun said simply. The crystalline being chimed a complex series of notes. Thesia translated. Harmony asks if you use mathematical formulas for the folding sequence. No formulas, Daehyun said. I fold until the metal is ready. How do you know when it's ready? Velcris asked. The metal tells me. Brix made a frustrated sound. Master Cho, with all respect, metal doesn't talk. We need numbers, measurements, data we can replicate. Daehyun set down his teacup. Come, all of you. Stand by the forge. The aliens gathered around the workspace. Daehyun pulled out fresh steel and placed it in the fire. Watch the color change, he said. Black to red to orange to yellow. See how it moves? That's not just temperature. That's the carbon content redistributing. That's impurities burning away. That's the metal's structure preparing to change. He pulled it out at orange-red and placed it on the anvil. Now listen. He struck it once. The sound was clear. Hear that? That's the frequency of properly heated steel. If it's too cold, the sound is dull. Too hot, and it rings sharp and unpleasant. He struck it again, and the aliens leaned closer. Even through their advanced hearing systems, they could detect the difference. Now feel, Daehyun said, hammering the metal. Feel how the hammer bounces. The right temperature gives the right resistance. Too hard, and you're fighting the metal. Too soft, and you're pushing mud. Velcris reached out one hand. May I try? Daehyun handed him the hammer and tongs. Gently. Let the hammer's weight do the work. Velcris struck the metal. The sound was wrong, harsh and uneven. He'd hit too hard using force instead of guidance. Again, Daehyun said. Listen to what you want to hear, then make that sound. Velcris tried again. This time the sound was closer, though still not quite right. But something changed in his expression. He was beginning to understand. For 3 days the aliens tried to forge steel the traditional way. Every attempt failed. Bricks burned his metal by heating it too hot. Core couldn't maintain consistent hammer strikes. The crystalline being, Harmony, couldn't hold tools properly with their crystalline appendages. Even Velcris, with his 200 years of experience, struggled to make a proper fold. On the 4th morning, Sora arrived with news. She'd been at the spaceport handling the surge of interest in Earth's metallurgy. Her tablet was full of messages. Minji, she said urgently, we have a problem. 47 different species have requested permission to visit Earth. They all want to learn traditional human crafts, not just metalworking, pottery, weaving, woodworking, everything. The diplomatic corps doesn't know how to handle it. Jiwon appeared behind her, looking stressed. It's more than that. The Artisan Coalition wants to establish cultural exchange programs. The industrial complex is lobbying against us, claiming traditional methods are inefficient and dangerous. And the military powers are offering massive contracts for Damascus steel weapons. Raxtil had been quietly observing the workshop for the past few days. Now he spoke up. The market has shifted. Before your demonstration, mass-produced goods were most valuable. Now anything made by hand commands premium prices. My own weapons manufacturing business is struggling because buyers want artisan-crafted items. Minji looked at Uncle Daehyun, who continued working calmly at the forge. Uncle, did you know this would happen? No, Daehyun said. But it's not surprising. People always value what is rare. For a long time, perfection was rare. Now tradition is rare. Velcris had been attempting another fold. The metal slipped from his tongs and fell to the floor. He stared at it in frustration. 200 years of metalworking and I can't make a simple fold. You're thinking too much, Daehyun said. You keep trying to calculate the perfect strike, the perfect temperature, the perfect angle. But the metal doesn't respond to calculations. It responds to understanding. I don't understand the difference, Velcris admitted. Daehyun picked up the fallen metal with his bare hands, judging its temperature by touch. When you use your quantum forge, what do you think about? The molecular structure, the atomic bonds, the quantum states I need to achieve. And the metal? What does it want? Velcris blinked. Metal doesn't want anything. It's just matter. That's why you're failing, Daehyun said gently. He placed the metal back in the forge. The metal has its own nature. Carbon makes it hard but brittle. Nickel makes it tough but soft. When you force them together with quantum fields, you're working against their nature. When you fold them together slowly with heat and time, you're working with their nature. He pulled out the metal and struck it. The sound was perfect. I'm not controlling the metal. I'm having a conversation with it. Thessia, who had been watching quietly, suddenly spoke. I remember now. My grandmother used to say something similar. She called it listening to the material's voice. I thought it was just poetry. It is poetry, Daehyun agreed, but poetry can be true. That night the workshop was quiet. Most of the aliens had returned to their quarters, frustrated and exhausted. Only Velcris remained sitting by the dying forge fire. Minji found him there, staring at a piece of steel. I've been the finest metal worker in 12 sectors for 200 years, he said quietly. I've made blades for emperors. My techniques are taught in universities across the galaxy, but your uncle in his simple workshop knows something I don't. What does he know? Minji asked. That perfection isn't the goal, Velcris said. Harmony is. He looked at the steel in his hands. My quantum forges create perfect atomic alignment. Every atom exactly where it should be, held in place by quantum fields. It's flawless, but your uncle's Damascus steel has atoms that have settled into natural positions. They're not perfect, but they're at peace with each other. That's why his steel is as strong as mine, maybe stronger. Will you keep trying? Minji asked. Velcris smiled. It was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Yes, but not to prove I can master your uncle's technique. I want to understand what I've been missing for 200 years. In the guest house, Sora was still working on her tablet when Minji returned. The numbers don't make sense, Sora said. Damascus steel shouldn't work as well as it does. The molecular structure isn't perfect. There are microscopic imperfections everywhere. but those imperfections somehow make it stronger, not weaker. Maybe perfection isn't as perfect as we think, Minji said. That's not scientific, Sora protested. Neither is listening to metal, Minji replied. But it works. The next morning, Velcris was at the forge before anyone else. He'd spent the night thinking about everything Daehyun had taught them. When Daehyun arrived, Velcris was already heating metal. Show me your hands, Daehyun said. Velcris held out all 4 hands. They were smooth, unblemished. The hands of someone who'd worked with quantum forges that did all the physical labor. By the end of this, they'll have scars, Daehyun said. Are you ready for that? Yes, Velcris said. And for the first time when he struck the metal, he didn't calculate the perfect angle or force. He simply listened for the sound he wanted to hear and let the hammer fall naturally. The sound rang clear and true through the workshop. Daehyun smiled. Good. Now do that 10,000 more times. 6 months had passed since the challenge. Minji stood in what used to be a simple mountain workshop and marveled at how much had changed. The building had expanded to 3 times its original size, but Uncle Daehyun had insisted on keeping the traditional forge at its heart. Around it, new workshops had been built where alien artisans learned alongside human apprentices. The sound that filled the valley now wasn't just one hammer, but dozens. Each one rang with a slightly different tone as smiths from across the galaxy practiced the ancient art of Damascus forging. It's beautiful, isn't it? Velcris said, walking up beside her. His 4 hands bore scars now, marks of 6 months of traditional metalworking. He wore a simple work apron instead of his formal robes, and there was coal dust under his fingernails. I never imagined it would become this, Minji admitted. In the main workshop, Uncle Daehyun worked beside a young Draknari student who was attempting her 7th fold. The girl's name was Vex, and she'd been studying for 3 months. Her first attempts had been disasters, but now her hammer strikes were beginning to find their rhythm. Good, Daehyun said, watching her work. Listen to the metal. What is it telling you? It's ready for the next fold, Vex said confidently. How do you know? The color is right. The sound is clear and... She paused, struggling to find words. It feels ready. Daehyun smiled. That was the breakthrough he waited for with every student. The moment they stopped trying to control the metal and started listening to it, Thesia was teaching pottery in the next building over. She'd remembered her grandmother's techniques and was now sharing them with students who'd never shaped clay by hand. The wheel spun, and wet earth became art under careful fingers. In the woodworking shop, a Quelon master carved traditional patterns into alien hardwoods. He'd been a factory manager for 50 years before coming here. Now his hands moved with the patience of someone who'd discovered that speed wasn't always progress. Sora found Minji by the main forge. She carried her tablet as always, but now it was covered in notes written by hand, not typed data. The latest reports are in, Sora said. Earth has received formal applications from 47 species requesting cultural exchange programs. Not just metalworking anymore. They want to learn pottery, weaving, carpentry, glassblowing, even traditional cooking methods. Can we handle that many? Minji asked. The diplomatic corps is setting up regional centers. Master craftspeople from across Earth are being recruited to teach. Sora scrolled through her notes. There's more. The Metalworkers Guild has officially merged with representatives from Earth. They're renaming it the Galactic Craftsman Guild. Uncle Daehyun has been named a Grand Master, the highest honor they give, Minji laughed. He'll hate the title. He already does. He told them to just call him Daehyun. Jiwon appeared, no longer looking stressed. In fact, he seemed happier than Minji had ever seen him. The economic reports are remarkable. Artisan-crafted goods are now the most valuable items in galactic trade. A single Damascus blade is worth more than 1,000 quantum-forged ones. Earth's economy has grown by 300% in 6 months. It's not about the money, a voice said behind them. Raxtel walked up, and he looked different too. Less polished, more genuine. I spent 50 years in arms dealing, always chasing the next big profit. Then I watched a human with a hammer teach a Draknari master that he'd forgotten how to see metal. It changed something in me. Changed how? Minji asked. I sold my weapons business, Raxtel said. I'm opening schools now. Places where young people can learn traditional crafts from across the galaxy. Not for profit, well, not primarily for profit. Because I realized we were losing something important in our rush to perfect everything. He pulled a small knife from his pocket. The blade was rough, the handle uneven, but there was pride in his eyes. I made this. Took me 6 weeks. It's terrible, but it's mine. I understand now why your uncle smiles when he works. Inside the workshop, Vex completed her fold. The metal came together cleanly, the layers bonding through heat and pressure and patience. She looked up at Daehyun with excitement. I did it. It's perfect. Not perfect, Daehyun corrected gently. But good. Very good. Velcris approached them, carrying something wrapped in cloth. Master Daehyun, I finished my first true Damascus blade. No quantum forge, no technological assistance, just fire, hammer, and time. He unwrapped it carefully. The blade was beautiful. The wave pattern flowed from handle to tip, each layer distinct but harmonious. It wasn't as technically perfect as his quantum-forged work had been, but it had something his old blades lacked. It has soul, Daehyun said, examining it closely. How long did it take? 3 weeks, Velcris admitted. 3 weeks for what my quantum forge could do in 3 hours. But this, he touched the blade reverently, this means something different. You understand now, Daehyun said. I do. For 200 years I created perfection, but perfection is cold. This blade has warmth because it carries the memory of its creation. Every hammer strike, every fold, every moment of patience is embedded in the steel. A young human entered the workshop. His name was Kim Junho, and he was Daehyun's newest apprentice. He'd been studying for 2 months and was still on his first blade. Master, Junho said nervously, I think I ruined my fold. The metal cracked. Show me, Daehyun said. They walked to Junho's station. The metal had indeed cracked during folding, a common beginner's mistake. Usually it meant starting over completely. Daehyun examined it carefully. This crack, why did it happen? I hammered too hard. I was impatient. And what did you learn? Junho thought for a moment. That the metal needs gentleness, not force. Good. Now can you repair it? Repair it? I thought I had to start over. In quantum forging, maybe. But this is traditional work. The crack is part of the blade story now. Heat it carefully. Fold the crack into the center and it will become a hidden lesson. The blade will be stronger because it carries the memory of your mistake. Junho's eyes widened. Really? Really. Perfection isn't the goal, Junho. Understanding is. Later that evening, Minji found Uncle Daehyun sitting outside his workshop, watching the sunset paint the mountains orange and gold. She sat beside him. Uncle, do you realize what you've started? The galaxy is changing because of what you taught them. Daehyun shrugged. I just taught them to listen to metal. They changed themselves. Velcris said you showed him what he'd forgotten. What was it? That the path matters as much as the destination. That patience is a strength, not a weakness. That harmony is better than perfection. He paused. And that sometimes the oldest ways aren't primitive, they're wise. Minji thought about the challenge 6 months ago. Velcris laughing at Damascus Steel. Raxtil's cruel bet. The arena full of aliens waiting for Earth to fail. Do you think they understand now? She asked. Some do. Others are still learning. But the important thing is they're asking questions again. For thousands of years, many species stopped asking questions because they thought they had all the answers. Now they're wondering what else they might have forgotten. A message appeared on Minji's communicator. It was from the Galactic Council. They wanted to establish a permanent cultural exchange program, with Earth at its center. Traditional craftspeople from across the galaxy would share their ancient techniques, preserving knowledge that was in danger of being lost to pure technology. Uncle, the council wants you to lead the program. Daehyun laughed. I'm too old to lead anything. I just want to make good steel. They're offering you a seat on the Galactic Council itself. Tell them no, but tell them they can send students, as many as want to learn. This workshop has room for everyone who brings patience and an open mind. In the workshop behind them, hammers rang in rhythm. Humans working alongside Dreknari, Krell teaching Quellan. Species that had fought wars now shared techniques and stories over cooling metal. The next morning, Minji attended the first meeting of the Galactic Craftsman Guild. It was held both at Uncle Daehyun's workshop and simultaneously on Nexus 7 through holographic link. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled both spaces. Velcris called the meeting to order. As the former head of the Metalworkers Guild, he'd been elected to lead the new organization. 6 months ago, he began, a human metallurgist accepted my challenge. I thought I was testing primitive techniques against advanced technology. Instead, I learned that I was the primitive one. Not in my tools, but in my thinking. He held up 2 blades. His old quantum-forged blade and his new Damascus blade. This blade, he said, indicating the quantum-forged one, is perfect. Every atom precisely placed, flawless in every measurement. This blade, he held up the Damascus steel, is not perfect. It has microscopic variations, tiny imperfections, but it's stronger. Do you know why? The hall was silent. Because perfection is rigid. The atoms in my quantum-forged blade are locked in place, held by quantum fields unable to adapt. But the Damascus blade's atoms are in harmony. They can shift and respond to stress. They work together instead of being forced together. He set both blades down. This isn't just about metallurgy. This is about how we approach everything. For thousands of years, many of us have been racing toward perfect efficiency, perfect technology, perfect control. But we forgot that nature doesn't work through perfection. Nature works through adaptation, harmony, and patience. Thesia stood. My people remembered our old ways because of the humans. We found ancient texts describing harmony forging. We're teaching it again, and we're finding that the old craftspeople knew things our modern scientists don't. Other representatives shared similar stories. Species across the galaxy were rediscovering traditional techniques and finding wisdom in ancient practices. Raxtil spoke next. The economic impact has been significant. The market has shifted dramatically. Artisan goods are now worth more than mass-produced perfection. But more importantly, young people are choosing apprenticeships again. They want to learn with their hands instead of just their computers. The meeting continued for hours. Plans were made for cultural exchanges, preservation programs, and workshops on hundreds of worlds. But the most important decision was simple. No technique would be lost again. If a species had traditional knowledge, it would be shared, taught, and preserved. As the meeting ended, Minji walked back to Uncle Daehyun's workshop. Inside, he was teaching a class of mixed species. They sat around the forge, watching him work, asking questions, learning to see metal through ancient eyes. Uncle, she said quietly, you know you changed the galaxy, right? Daehyun smiled and continued his work. I didn't change anything. I just reminded them of what they already knew but forgot. What's that? That the universe has its own rhythm. You can force things to happen faster, but sometimes faster isn't better. Sometimes the patient path creates stronger results. He pulled a glowing blade from the forge. The students leaned closer, watching how the color shifted, learning to hear what the metal was saying. Besides, Daehyun added, I didn't do this alone. You carried that blade to the stars. Velkris had the courage to admit he didn't know everything. Thesia remembered her grandmother's wisdom. Everyone played their part. Outside, the sun set over the mountains. The sound of hammers on metal echoed through the valley, a sound that had existed for thousands of years and would continue for thousands more. Different species, different worlds, different hammers, but the same ancient rhythm. Minji smiled. When Velkris had called Damascus steel impossible, she'd simply told him the truth. Her uncle forged them on weekends. That simple statement had changed everything. Now her uncle was teaching the galaxy to forge more than just steel. He was teaching them to forge bridges between past and future, between technology and tradition, between perfection and harmony. And in his simple mountain workshop, with coal smoke rising into the evening sky, the old master worked his forge and smiled.